Thank you, Janet. Thank you for that lovely introduction, and I want to thank Ceres for putting on this wonderful event. I have to tell you, I am delighted to be here with all of you this morning. PG&E is so proud of our work with Ceres, and we're very, very excited to welcome you all back to the city by the bay, to San Francisco. We're delighted that you're here. I think we can all agree that we're coming together here at a very pivotal moment in our country's history. And I think we'd also agree that the mission and the ideas that Ceres stands for have never been more important or, frankly, more timely or more relevant. The idea that sustainability and the health of our economy go hand in hand. The idea, especially, that if we're serious about solving the big sustainability challenges that we face, the business community must lead. We understand that at PG&E. We understand particularly how important the transition of going to a low-carbon economy is. We also understand that as a California energy company, we have a unique opportunity to make an impact. The reality is the world is watching what we do, all of us here in California. Again, now, probably more than ever. After all, think about it. California really only represents about 1% of the global GHG emissions. And yet, there can be no greater impact, there could be no finer legacy than pointing the way for addressing and helping lead the way in addressing the remaining 99%. And California is really focused on doing just that. In fact, California has made it very clear that it will continue to embrace that leadership role and was going to move full speed ahead, regardless of what happens at the federal level. All of which means, of course, that those of us that believe that a low-carbon future is crucial for our economy, I have to tell you, this next decade is really important. It really matters. The question is, how can we here in California create a climate, excuse the pun, that will allow all of us to be successful? And that's really what I want to talk about today. Let me start out by letting all of you know, those of you that may not be familiar with my company, PG&E, where we stand. Our stance on climate change goes back many, many years. In fact, we were one of the very first Fortune 500 companies to state emphatically that the climate threat was real and that action needed to be taken immediately. And I'm proud of that. We followed that by becoming the first major energy company to support California's landmark AB 32 bill, which is all about the Global Warming Solutions Act. And we did that in 2006. I think it's also worth setting some context in terms of where we've been and where we are today and how far we've come. And yet, it's just the beginning. So let's talk about 2003. Where were we in 2003? Well, only about 11% of the power that we delivered for our customers was renewables. Today, that number is nearly 33%. We've tripled that. And we did that 4 years ahead of schedule. So we didn't just march to some sort of compliance order. We moved quickly and rapidly because the faster we could get this done, the better. And think about private solar. Back in 2000, we had 163, that's it, solar installations as a part of a rooftop system. Today, we have nearly 300,000 private solar rooftop installations in our service area. 1 of every 4 solar rooftops in the country are in our service area. And we connect them as quickly as we can. In fact, we've gone from it taking something like 6 weeks to go through the process of an interconnection to today being the leading utility in terms of interconnection speed, and we do it in about 3 days. Again, it's about making it important, making it real, and showing up in a way that really contributes to the overall solution. It's similar with electric vehicles, and I'm really excited about electric vehicles. Today, 1 of every 5 electric vehicles in the country is in our service area. And as Janet mentioned, today, about 70% of the power that we deliver to our customers is greenhouse gas free. And we're so proud of that. And I have to tell you, as proud as we are of that, that's a good start. There's more work for us to do. And we hit that level of integrating all these renewables while at the same time, and this is why this is so important, it can be done. At the same time, we improved the reliability of our system to a record level, and we created jobs, lots of jobs. All in the backdrop of doing this, while California's economy has absolutely boomed in the last decade. So we're very excited about the combination of being green and sustainable and helpful to the economy. Now, before we get too excited about all our success, right, there's a lot more work for us to do, a lot more work. Right now, California is getting ready, right? We've got a goal of getting our emissions down to 1990 levels by the year 2020, 3 years from now. And you know what? We've got a really good shot at making that happen. I think we've got real clarity of how we're going to get there. I think we're going to hit that goal, and we're excited about that. But the goal really accelerates, and by 2030, our goal is to get emissions 40% below where they were in 1990. That's a pretty heavy-duty goal. And I think, if you think about it, it's almost like cutting emissions in half again in a very short period of time. To get there, California is all in and saying, what will it take? And so some of the things that it's done, and I know that you're familiar with this, but we've set a target of 50% renewables by 2030. We're doubling energy efficiency. And the California Air Resource Board is saying that in order to really cut emissions, and particularly in the transportation sector, we'll have to have 4.2 million electric vehicles on the road. Now, I think it's important to, these are great goals, but I think it's also important to acknowledge that this is some pretty significant stuff. We're going to be moving from an energy economy that's been in a period of transition to, frankly, an energy economy that's going to be in transformation. And we've got to figure out how to make that happen. And we've got 13 years to get there. Now, that may seem like a lot. It's not particularly for an energy company that, frankly, plans ahead in 20, 30, and 40-year intervals. That's what we do. And so we've got to be making choices and decisions now to be able to get there. So given this challenge, what are the keys to making sure that we continue to be successful? Where should we focus as we think about putting these policies in place to drive these changes? And let me suggest 3 areas, and I want to talk about those 3. First, I think we all need to keep our eye on our North Star. Our North Star is all about cutting greenhouse gas emissions. Second, we need to recognize that a foundational element of our strategy will be all about this dynamic and resilient grid that we've been building for over 100 years. And third, and I think this is also very important, we can't afford to leave anyone behind. So let me talk about each one of those. Starting with greenhouse gas emissions and reducing those as our North Star. This flows directly from both the spirit and the letter of the Paris Accord, where it was really all about reducing greenhouse gas emissions instead of really picking or choosing one technology and how to get there. We need to give customers, our consumers, companies in general, the freedom to find the most viable options, maximize innovation, and provide the best value. Due in large part to investments and innovation here in California, we now have so many technologies to choose from. We have lots of options that can create very viable solutions. The climate challenge is no longer an issue of whether we have the right technologies. In fact, they're here, and they're becoming increasingly affordable. Instead, the real challenge is how do we integrate all these solutions seamlessly to maximize their collective benefits? Which brings me to my second point. We need policy that recognizes the critical role of the electric grid and its ability to really enable clean energy technologies on a going-forth basis. We're seeing an amazing amount of innovation here in California and throughout the world, from renewables and storage to electric vehicles and smart grid applications. Lots of stuff going on, especially out of Silicon Valley. But as I just mentioned, it's not about the technology so much as how we integrate it. How do we integrate this seamlessly, reliably, safely, always there, always on, affordably? How do we do that? And that's, again, why the grid is so critical. It's the platform. It provides connectivity, which means it can offer universal access to everyone who connects to it. It provides scale, which is critical when you're working to solve a challenge as big, as important as climate change. It provides stability. It's always there. With a modern, dynamic grid, we have an enabling platform for deep decarbonization. The modern grid is what really will allow a company like PG&E to shift its thinking from simply being an energy provider to a climate solutions company. But modernizing this infrastructure is going to require significant investment. We've been making investments. Our company alone invests about $6 billion a year on modernizing and upgrading our system. But we need policies that recognize that that investment is important. And the single biggest opportunity that I believe we have with the grid today is how we could leverage that grid in the electrification of the transportation sector. And you saw a picture that Mindy showed you of a little electric car. They don't look like that. They're really sleek and cool and very exciting, right? There's Teslas and Bolts and all sorts of things. They're phenomenal, and our customers are really wanting them. But one thing really keeps them, in many cases, from buying electric vehicles, and this issue of, what do they call it, range anxiety. This fear, right? There's a new thing. This fear of running out of juice. So we've got to figure out how do we provide charging stations that are as ubiquitous as the gasoline stations that we're all very, very familiar with. We've made incredible progress on renewables. So we've invested in smart grid technologies, and we now need to leverage that investment and leverage that very clean power to take on the transportation sector in a good way, and that is to decarbonize it. I think it's impossible for me to overstate how important this opportunity is for us. Transportation sources here in California make up the absolute biggest share of greenhouse gas emissions in the state. As a matter of fact, it's about 40%. We cannot achieve our carbon reduction goals. We cannot even begin to solve our climate change goals without decarbonizing the transportation sector. And we are all in on making that happen. I'll also note that electrification also gives us an added benefit, and that is improving air quality, which in so many parts of our state is still a significant issue. So it's a double win from a sustainability perspective. It's an opportunity that I think California should be going after aggressively. And I'll add, it's an area where we can really lead the rest of the country and frankly, the rest of the world in. Our auto policies in the past, our standards, our low carbon fuel standards in the past really moved markets, and they really set the standard for the country in the past, and I think we have the opportunity now to do the same thing with electrification. Which leads me to my last point, and that is we can't leave anyone behind. The clean energy future must be accessible and affordable to all. I like to say, it's not sustainable if it's not affordable. It has to be affordable. If we create a new energy economy of haves and have-nots, it won't work economically, and it's certainly not the right thing to do. This is something I'm absolutely passionate about, and I'll tell you a little story about that. So I'm an immigrant. I came to this country when I was 5 years old with my parents from Cuba. Like all immigrants, basically with the clothes on our backs. And my parents worked multiple jobs to make ends meet, and eventually they were able to sort of put enough money together to buy the little local grocery store in the corner, tiny little speck of a store. But I tell you, if you know anything about the grocery business, you'll know that those margins are paper thin. And you'll also know that the energy bill, the utility bill at the end of the month is a big part of the cost structure. And if the utility bill was really large in one particular month, my father was trying to figure out how to make ends meet in that little grocery store. It made all the difference between having a good month and a bad month. And at PG&E, 40% of our customers are low-income households. 40% in the great state of California, right? So we believe we've got a responsibility to be there for all our customers, including our low-income customers. We recognize the awesome responsibility that we have to do this. And we know that businesses, hospitals, schools, communities, and little grocery stores, they all count on us. They can't exist or thrive without safe, affordable, and reliable energy. And of course, it's got to be clean. So as we invest in our clean energy future, we have to do so in a way that works for all customers and that also provides them with opportunities to engage in a clean energy economy. We are excited about meeting those challenges. We are all in on finding solutions. We're absolutely committed to being the clean energy leader and a champion for the goals that California is driving towards. And at the same time, and you heard it from Janet as well, we can't do it alone. We don't have all the answers. You're going to see us reaching out and engaging, working to build coalitions, partnering with non-traditional players in the energy space, and collaborating on everything from technology innovation to policy. No single company, no single policy, no single technology has the ability to come up with an answer on its own or be a silver bullet to all the challenges that we have. It's going to be a process of, I don't know, collaboration, collaborative innovation, and finding common ground and exploring together how we can best achieve our shared goals. That's the way PG&E is going to lead. That's the way we think we all need to lead, and we think that's how we are going to be successful. What I ask of you is, as you think about your future and that you look to energy providers in your home states as potential partners, as potential providers and helpers in helping you come up with solutions. Think of us not just simply as the local utility, but think of us, many of us, as really very engaged in the climate solution companies. Remember that this is an industry that was built to do big things. It's also an industry that was frankly designed to serve the public interest. It's very much part of our DNA. Companies like PG&E have a broad role that extends far beyond delivering more renewable energy. We believe we can help with resilience. We believe that we can help with transportation. We believe we can help with adaptation. We can help with public awareness and education and advocacy. We reach into every home and business in the country, and we have relationships with hundreds of millions of customers. And that represents a great opportunity for all of you to leverage when you think about going back to your home states and figuring out what happens next. Bottom line is we're going to continue to make big progress on climate change. We are all in it. I believe we have to take further advantage of the industry's ability to do big things in a big way. We are ready and able to be big partners for all of you. So thank you very much for your time. I'm delighted to be here, and I look forward to your questions.
Great. Can you hear me? Great. Well, thank you so much, Geisha, for joining us this morning and for giving us some really compelling proof points of not just what conceptually is possible in terms of bringing about clean energy transition or transformation, as you put it, but really showing how it's done on the ground and leveraging that ability to bring along the rest of the country and beyond. Before we jump into a bit of a conversation here, I wanted to remind the audience that we've reserved a little bit of time. We're running a little behind, but we will still have some time for audience questions. There is guidance on each of your tables in terms of how to submit a question using the Series 17 app. And as a quick reminder, just go to the main menu in the app, click on the agenda, click on this session, Embracing the Transformation, PG&E and the Clean Energy Future, and you'll then see the live Q&A section you can click on and submit your questions. So without further ado, I'd love to jump in a little bit further. You touched on some of the key areas of clean energy transformation, and a particularly hot topic that you noted is electric vehicles. And we're seeing extraordinary growth with the electric vehicles market. Yep. California obviously playing a leadership role in the United States, and PG&E playing a leadership role on that. What do you see, how do you envision PG&E's role going forward in this burgeoning market for electric vehicles? And do you see PG&E emerging as a competitor to big oil, fueling our transportation needs in a decarbonized world?
So as I mentioned, when you look at the transportation sector, it represents such an opportunity for us to really decarbonize. Again, 40% of the GHG comes from transportation. So as a climate solutions company, when we look at, all right, how do we help the great state of California achieve its goals, you can't help but look there. And at the end of the day, companies like ours are infrastructure companies. We know how to build things, we know how to maintain things, we know how to get the capital, the systems in place, the engineering, the project management to make it happen. We know how to get that work done. And what we were seeing was, frankly, that other providers of charging stations were not really having great success. This is a few years ago. There were just not a lot of penetration of charging stations. And from a customer's point of view, there are two things that were frankly driving their decision to purchase or not purchase an electric vehicle. First was the price point and the availability of different models and having options in terms of the actual vehicle. Well, there's a lot of options on the market now. Just about every auto manufacturer has a line of electric vehicles. So, and the prices are going down. So it's not Teslas. There's a lot of vehicles out there that are beginning to actually become, I think, much more affordable. But the second issue, this range anxiety that I mentioned in my talk, continue to come up. And so we realized that in order to really spur on this sort of electric vehicle adoption in the state, that someone needed to make sure that there were electric charging stations in place. And that's when we went to the CPUC and we asked to allow us to put in those charging stations. And we've gotten permission, we're going to be installing 7,500 charging stations in Northern and Central California at a cost of about $130 million. And I will tell you, it is the largest deployment of electric charging stations in the country, and yet it's a fraction of what we need. I think we're going to learn a lot from it. We're going to learn what it takes, how it works, how to kind of work with different types of customers, how to get parking spaces and that whole process. I think we're going to learn a lot in the pilot, and you can expect to see many more proposals from PG&E and other utilities in being that provider. Part of me doesn't care who does it. I just want to make sure that there's choice and options for our customers so that when they get these electric vehicles, they don't have that fear of running out of juice. So I think they do need to become ubiquitous, and I think we can play a significant role in that because of our background and the skill sets that we bring to it.
Great, thank you. And you could start to see as charging infrastructure is built out and as the range of the vehicles that are available on the market begin to expand, now over 200 miles range in between charges, you can see a nice convergence in terms of ensuring that this market scales up rapidly. So another area I'd love to dig into a little bit that is often sort of the lost stepchild, often overlooked in the clean energy equation. We know it's not overlooked by PG&E, but is crucial for meeting our greenhouse gas emissions targets and climate stabilization, and that's energy efficiency, also sometimes now referred to as energy productivity. Could you tell us more about PG&E's role in terms of tapping into that cost savings and greenhouse gas emissions reduction potential of energy efficiency?
So we're just enormous believers in the role that energy efficiency plays in really our customers' lives. So before I get into what we're doing in the future, just for those of you that may not know, when you look at energy or electricity per capita usage for the state of California, it's been basically flat for the last 40 or so years. I mean, it's amazing. Now, why is that? Is it because we're not adopting the gadgets and gizmos that the rest of the country is? Or is it because we don't have fancy homes and wine coolers and refrigeration? No. By the way, the rest of the country, the same time frame, it's seen a 50% increase in electric usage per capita. So we're flat and everybody else is going up. I think, and we know, that a lot of the reason for that, the main reason for that, is energy efficiency. We have really adopted energy efficiency as, we call it the first fuel. In the dispatch order, when we're making choices about how we're going to solve future energy needs, the first thing that we talk about, the first thing that we consider is energy efficiency. It's the first dispatch. So for example, when we made the decision to not relicense Diablo Canyon, pass its operating license in 2024 and 2025, we have to replace that power, and we made a commitment to replace that power with GHG-free resources. The first tranche that we announced we would be initiating is a 2,000 gigawatt hour request for offer, RFO, for energy efficiency. It matters. It really makes a difference. And when I talk about affordability for our customers, sometimes people get all sort of wrapped around the axle about, you know, your rates are high. Well, yeah, maybe, but our bills are low. Our bills are low, and I think a big part of the reason, apart from the climate, we have nice climate in parts of our state, but not the whole state. Apart from the climate that we have here, energy efficiency has played a huge role, huge role. So our bills are 30% below the national average while we've been integrating renewables, while we've been doing all this other climate change policy work. So it's an enabler, it's a way of keeping bills lower, it's a way of engaging customers in really being better stewards of the usage of the energy that they consume, and it's engaging them in a really meaningful way. So while we've done a lot and we've kept it flat, we think that there's still a lot more opportunity for energy efficiency. Huge opportunity still out there. So recently we launched a pilot, we called it Step Up and Power Down. And we worked with two cities, the city of San Jose and the city of San Francisco, to really, in essence, engage businesses on changing mindsets and behaviors of their employees to do simple things like turning off those lights and unplugging that computer, et cetera. And it's amazing, in a short period of time, we were able to save 50 gigawatt hours of energy just by engaging communities to think about energy efficiency in a very simple way. So we are big believers. We think that there's more room for improvement, and we hope that other states really adopt a similar philosophy.
Indeed, and you've been playing a central role in this beneficial horse race, Massachusetts and California jockeying for position as energy efficiency leaders in the country, and we look forward to seeing the rest of the nation come
Bring
along.
it, Massachusetts.
So switching a little bit over to the policy realm, you mentioned the Paris Agreement. We're incredibly grateful that PG&E lent its voice in support of the U.S. staying the course on the Paris Agreement in the aftermath of the federal elections in the United States, joining now over 1,000 companies and investors who have called for the U.S. to stay the course on Paris and to continue clean energy and climate policies and investments that are consistent with that. And you've also mentioned PG&E's history, for example, supporting AB 32, the Watershed California Global Warming Solutions Act. Why do you see it as important from PG&E's perspective for the U.S. to stay the course on the Paris Agreement?
It's just so fundamentally important. We were part of the governor's delegation in Paris. Our CEO and several others attended the conference, and we really advocated and joined hands, and we're so excited about having been there and been part of that very, very historic moment. We believe in it. We believe in its power. We believe in its global, this is a global issue we're dealing with. And so I think to have countries join hands and make that pledge of what they were intending to do was so huge. And to back away from that, for us to back away from that, I just would think is unconscionable. And so I think it matters. It's important. I'm looking ahead, to a world where my children will inherit and my grandchildren someday, although I'm in no hurry for that. And I want it to be better. I want this world to be clean. And I think that raising the dialogue, raising the stature of climate change to the level that we did at the Paris meetings was so important. To step away from that would just be the wrong thing to do, and why we were so adamant about lending our voice to the agreement. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that and your support for the U.S. staying the course on the Paris Agreement. And I'd like to echo and underscore what my colleagues have already put out there today, that everyone in the room can play a part in raising your voices consistent with this and ensuring that we actually do stay the course. It's crucial. So the pace of change in terms of clean energy transformation is already quite rapid, but we really need even greater speed and scale if we're really going to limit temperature rise to well below 2 degrees Celsius, have a stable climate, resilient, healthy communities and economies and society. So there are a lot of things, obviously, that need to change. We don't have all of the pieces we need yet. But if there's one thing, one rule, one legacy attribute of the electric power system that you would single out as being crucial to change, and that perhaps everyone in the room, or at least many in the room, could play a role in changing investors and advocates and companies, what would that be?
There's a few, but I'm going to give you one that's, you're going to say, really? It goes back to Thomas Edison days and how the business model for utilities was set up. So utilities build for 30, 40-year time horizons, and utilities build the assets, own the assets, and then we recover that investment by something called the kWh, the kilowatt hour. It's a volumetric rate design that was put in place literally, 100 years ago. I think that rate design is like, it's not going to help us in the future. And why do I say that? Well, when you think about the grid and integrating all of these different technologies, whether they be storage or solar rooftop units, electric vehicles, et cetera, our customers are no longer just takers of power. In many cases, they're producing power, they're selling power, they're trying to figure out how to levelize power. It's a different kind of business model need that we have today. And simply sort of charging on a per kWh, I just don't think that's going to work for us in the future. So we need a different business model where perhaps utilities are incented for, I don't know, deploying greater levels of distributed energy resources, not just necessarily owning everything themselves. Perhaps we're compensated by different formulas in terms of the value of the grid and how that grid helps you. I mean, I think about cellular phones. You think back to when we first got cellular phones. We were paying by the minute. Does anybody pay by the minute anymore? No. And then we had all these friends and family plans and the weekend rate and all that. Anybody doing that? No. Nobody cares. It's like the data. It's the data. And you pay a fixed charge and you get a certain amount of data depending on how much you want. I don't know what the future is going to be like for the electric market, but today the analogy is we're paying by the minute. And our grid is changing and our energy whole infrastructure is changing, and I think we need a very different regulatory construct, a very different business model to make sure that these very important investments that need to be made to make sure the grid is resilient, to make sure the grid is modern, to enable deep decarbonization, investments are necessary, and I want to make sure those investments are somehow recovered in a different way than this volumetric thing. So we don't have an answer yet. We're trying to figure it out. We've got lots of people, smart people, trying to work through that, and obviously it'll be a very collaborative process. But that could be a derailer for us if we don't deal with it.
Absolutely, and Ceres, and I know a lot of different folks in the room really look forward to solving that and changing the paradigm, looking at energy more as a service as opposed to a commodity.
Right.
So thank you for that. So you're operating in a state that has really robust commitments to clean energy, and you also have requirements in terms of delivering energy at fair and equitable rates. And customers obviously have a keen interest in both sides of this equation. I know it's more multifaceted than that, but these are big pieces of the equation. How do you bring in the customer voice in all of this as you figure out your plans going forward and meeting those imperatives?
I think you ask, and I think you engage, and I think you really make sure that you listen for what the customer's needs are. There's no question that our customers have choices today that they never had before. And I think as an energy provider, it's not about stopping that choice, it's about enabling that choice. How are we part of the solution here? So it's about making sure that you're tuned in to what your customer needs are. We know that energy efficiency matters to them, so we have, again, a very robust program of connecting with them, helping them manage their bills, helping them manage their usage. Our customers are they have sustainability on their minds. It's part of their DNA. So I think the kind of company we are, we have to empower and enable them to get as far as they need to be. And it's being open. It's building coalitions. It's hearing their voice, having focus groups, having research, surveys done, and then making sure that our products and services are reflective of their needs.
Great, thank you. And certainly a lot of customers and others in the room today who are interested in staying part of that dialogue. So we'd like to open it up now to questions from the room that have been submitted through the app. John, do we have a first question?
We do indeed. Lots of questions, in fact. Too many questions. First one, I want to maybe combine a few that have come up a few times, and that's about the role of natural gas. A lot of people talk about it as, or have talked about it as a bridge fuel, and increasingly saying, but maybe we can't even afford to do that if we're going to meet our carbon reduction goals. So what is your view on the role of natural gas? And I'll throw in one extra piece if you want to touch on it, is there a role for carbon capture in the future in trying to incorporate fossil fuels in a clean energy future?
So it's a really important question. When you think about greenhouse gas emission reductions nationally, the role that natural gas has played there has been pretty significant. It has been a bridge fuel. It has been a transition fuel, helping people get off coal and go to natural gas. And I think you're going to continue to see that. I mean, I know that there's a lot of concern about, rightfully so, about what happens with a clean power plan. Will that stop the industry's movement away from coal? And I would tell you, my opinion is that the industry continues to move forward in moving away from coal. not that you're ignoring, people, oh, I saw an article the other day that said that the industry was ignoring President Trump. We're not ignoring President Trump. We just don't want to ignore our customers, and our customers have made it very clear that they want to see a cleaner energy economy. So the role of natural gas has been very important, and I think will continue to be important even in California for the foreseeable future. I talked about transportation. So electrification is absolutely the solution for passenger vehicles, but for these medium duty and heavy duty vehicles, trucks and buses and that kind of a thing, we think there might be more of a CNG solution. Long haul vehicles could be more of a CNG solution. So I think there's a role for gas. I think over time, there's no question that gas usage declines over time, but I don't think it's overnight. I think it's something that we have to manage, and I think we've got to be smart about it. Because it does provide a certain amount of the flexible resource that we need to kind of put everything together. I mean, when the sun's not shining, we've got to figure out how to still provide access to electricity to our customers, and gas does play a role with that in our company today. So in the future, I think you'll see less, but I think they'll still be there. We're also looking at, we're exploring with biogas, we're exploring how to reduce the methane content in gas. So lots of different things there. Carbon capture, it's possible, but I think more likely you just see less gas throughput and more biogas in the mix in the future.
And I can't help but add a couple of quick points on the natural gas equation. One is that more and more, but still very few companies are turning to doing 2-degree scenario analysis to look at how to calibrate their business plans, investments, and practices to a rapidly decarbonizing world and to meeting the global objective of limiting temperature rise and stabilizing the climate. And that starts to illuminate what investments make sense, including natural gas, and what investments are likely to lead to stranded assets. And this is absolutely crucial in the natural gas context, because what can look helpful from an emissions reduction perspective near term can look absolutely the opposite over the long term. And so this kind of business planning and analysis is absolutely key. And the other piece is that there's much discussion right now in Washington, D.C. about rolling back regulation standards on fugitive emissions from natural gas extraction. And the more that those protections are rolled back and we don't reduce the greenhouse gas emissions impact of natural gas, the smaller of a place it can hold in the energy mix, because its footprint will be too high, will be inconsistent with our decarbonization objectives.
So another question is about cost. It's a lot to do, and it costs a lot to do it. Is it possible to help us understand how much investment, quantify the investment that's needed to modernize the grid? And then, of course, the second question is, who pays?
So PG&E is spending about $6 billion a year modernizing the grid, both the gas and the electric, and necessary to allow two-way power flows, to enable the smart grid technologies that are going to, again, be very helpful. So the way it works is you make this investment, and again, going back to the rate discussion I had a minute ago, you recover that cost over a 30-year time frame, the life of the assets, through the rates and that we charge our customers. So ultimately, our customers pay over a very long period of time. And so it's an important issue, because how much is too much? How much cost can you continue to add to that bill until it starts becoming an affordability issue? I mentioned the 40% of our customers that are low income, and our concern that we want to make sure that their bills continue to be low. Again, I mentioned how our bills are lower than the national average. So we're doing everything on our part to figure out how to be as efficient as we can be in actually putting in place those grid modernization initiatives. We're looking at everything. We're looking at how the work that we're doing, how to do that work better, use of technology. The grid's got to be modernized, but how do you do that in the least cost way so that it can have the least impact on customers over time? But it's got to be done, because as I said, without a grid that's capable of helping to decarbonize other sectors of the economy, we're really not going to be successful.
Terrific. We have time for one or two more? All right. Obviously, we've talked about the need for PG&E to be a leader nationally, and a question related to that is, what is PG&E doing to share best practices, certainly with other utilities in other states, but maybe even extending it beyond your immediate peers?
So we do a lot of work in that regard. I'll tell you, I think within weeks of the presidential election, we put an op-ed in various papers around our service area where we stood by the Paris Accord. We stood by the need to continue to to focus on sustainability, to focus on reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. We're very public with that. We talk about it. We have gatherings with other executives from other utilities, and we always talk about what's happening in California. And I have to tell you, there are some parts of the country that look at California as like, whoa, crazy California, what are you coming up with next? And it's like, well, let me tell you. And we just go right into the good work we've done, the results we've achieved, the progress we've made. It's not so crazy, is it? And so I think that we can be a great example for others. And we share constantly. We have a lot of folks come and visit with us. How have you managed to integrate all these renewables? I mean, they're just perplexed by that. In some states, they only have, they're going to a 10% RPS standard and they're pulling their hair out. And we're at 33 going to 55, right? 50 for the state, and we made an additional commitment of 55. And we're like, we're comfortable with it. We can do this. We got it. And it requires purposeful action. It requires deliberate actions to make sure that it all works safely and reliably, but it can be done. And so we share all of that, and they come and they visit. We're really leading again with the whole electrification perspective, and we're sharing those lessons learned. So I think we can play a role as a leader in the utility industry. It's a role we are comfortable with. It's a role we've been playing and will continue to play.
Terrific. Thank you very much. I like this one. Would it not be helpful to make mandatory for businesses to disclose how they adapt their business model both to reduce the risk and seize the opportunities that the transition towards a more sustainable and less carbon-intensive economy entails?
I don't know that I understood that question.
Should there be a mandatory disclosure about assessing the risk?
I don't like anything mandatory. I think that, I really don't. I think that we need to encourage, I think we need to express and explain why it's important and bring people to the side of the light, right? Without necessarily being a mandate. I think nobody likes to be forced to do anything. At the same time, there is a benefit to understanding from a disclosure perspective, right? What the various, I don't know, what the footprint is, the carbon footprint is, or the risks that they entail. I don't know, I'd have to understand a little bit more about what the person has in mind with that question. I'm normally a little resistant and a little reticent about forcing people to do things. I think it's about choice.
Fair enough. Has your commitment to renewables increased your bottom line and decreased electricity bills for your customers?
Oh boy, so let me tell you about California. California, the way that our regulatory construct, the way that our bills are set up, we have what we call a pass-through energy charge to our customers. We don't profit from the renewables that we've procured. We contract to pay for a certain, whatever those renewables cost, and through an energy charge with no markup, it goes straight to the customer. So we don't profit from that. The only profit that we would make would be on assets that we own. And we own a very small amount of renewables. We own, I think, 150 megawatts of solar and a small, actually, some of our hydro facilities qualify. Some of the small hydro facilities qualify. So we'd make a little profit on that. So no, I don't think that the renewable mandates have actually improved our bottom line. And the second part of the question was? Did it also have any impact on customer bills? It has had an impact on customer bills because in the early days, I mean, again, California's been a bit of a market maker. In the early days, and I think appropriately so, we signed some pretty high-cost, long-term renewable contracts that did marginally increase our bills somewhat. Now, the good news is, because we made that market here in California, renewable costs has really come down, solar, wind, all of it. So folks that take advantage of renewables on a going-forth basis, renewable contracts we enter into in the future won't materially impact the bills. But in the short term, back in the day when we were signing some of those, yeah, it did have a little bit of a negative impact. And that's why we're trying to offset those with other efficiency measures.
And I'd love to point back to the Power Forward 3.0 report that was mentioned earlier this morning that Ceres released with our partners just yesterday that documents corporate leadership as consumers of energy in terms of renewable energy and energy efficiency. And those stepped up dramatic commitments and actual purchases are spurred not just by commitments to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but very much by cost savings as well, and reliability and predictability. So there's some good data points there that are responsive to that question.
There are a lot more questions that I know people would love to have you answer, but I'm being nudged to hand it back to Sue to wrap things up.
Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. So we will have a networking break before we resume at 11 o'clock. There is a breakout session, among others, on electric vehicles, if you'd like to continue a deeper dive on one of the core topics that came up this morning. In the meantime, I hope you will join me in giving a warm round of appreciation for Geisha. Thank you. Thank you so much.